Hello, hello, hello. Time zone appropriate salutations to you all, and welcome to What the Trans. I'm Ashleigh Talbot.
Hi, Michelle O'Toole. Welcome to What the Trads. How are you doing, Ashleigh?
I am good, Michelle. Yes. So this is a new thing that we're doing, isn't it?
Yeah. This is actually the second time we've done it. We had a practice that went okay, I think.
Yes, this is our second attempt, but I wasn't going to mention that to make us look a little bit more professional, but hey, cool, whatever.
Well, I think professionalism is something that will come later. I think these first few will be very, very touch and go, but maybe that'll be entertaining in itself.
One does hope so. I'm just aiming for somewhere between ropey and, if we can hit that balance at this point, I'm happy with it. So yes, What the Trans, a new podcast from the perspective of the trans community. So yeah, the clue is somewhat in the words there. So news, culture, entertainment, recommendations, icons, and of course, bastards. All of these things will be discussed and more on this podcast, which will be regular as soon as we've decided how regular it's going to be. So, yes, what have you been up to, Michelle?
Well, yesterday I went to see some friends, had some cocktails, which is probably a mistake, but I am now ready to bring my A game, or at least a game of some description.
Absolutely, yeah, that's as much as one could ask for, really. Awesome. So, first up, the news.
Yeah, let's have some terrible news. So what's going on, Ash?
Well, first up, YouTube, who have been accused of preventing videos containing LGBT terms like queer or transgender from making any money on the site. Now, this element of it has been sadly rumbling along for a little while now, but more recently, some more accusations have emerged, which have centred around YouTube running adverts for things like conversion therapy and for companies which are vocally critical of the LGBT community. But a spokesperson rather, from the video streaming service said, sometimes our systems get it wrong. So, what do you think? Is that a systems thing, or is that a decision?
Well, I heard somewhere that, 20 hours of video is uploaded every second or something stupid, so I don't think there's anyone sitting around, listening to or watching everything that gets uploaded, because that would be the worst job in the world.
Yeah.
That person, it would have a high suicide rate, I think. So I'm guessing, I've been following a YouTuber for a while called Chase Ross. He's very good. He covers a lot of trans male issues, and also covers sex toys for the trans community. He's basically doing a hell of a public service. He's very funny, very charming, very sincere, and I thoroughly recommend that you follow him at uppercase Chase1 on YouTube. But yeah, he's the guy who sort of brought this into at least the British media's attention, because he made a video which was simply titled, "I'm afraid my channel's going to get deleted." Basically, goes through with the video, pointing out exactly where his videos get demonetized. He does screen caps, and the second he puts in transgender in the title of his video, bang! YouTube decided that is not advertiser friendly and puts it in the adult section. I don't think it's called the adult section, but it's restricted, which limits his views, limits his AdSense money, and it seems to be a problem that's primarily affecting LGBT channels and not necessarily affecting what I would count as the high priority channels that people should know about before they stick on adverts, like white nationalists and stuff, and terrible people. And so he goes on to say, basically, he blames the algorithm, and he noticed that he lives in Canada, he's a Canadian, and he notices that when he goes abroad and his friends tell him, I saw this horrible advert on your video, he's noticing that there's some geolocation issues, in some countries he's getting certain adverts, and YouTube, as it works, is creators can basically block certain advertisers from advertising on their videos. That option is there, but the problem lies in you upload a video that first day. In Chase's case, he can get 80,000 to 100,000 views in the space of a couple of days. And if you don't know these adverts are happening, then you're fucked. The vast majority of your audience will have seen them anyway.
Yeah, indeed. And it's just, to me, it's, other people have accused them of being hypocritical about it, haven't they? Because you do see the sort of YouTube idents and other things that they're doing, because it is now, it's the summer, it's Pride season in a lot of places, and so they are quite willing to say, we support the LGBT community, while demonetizing our videos and giving advertising space to people like, as you say, white supremacists and evangelical Christians and people who, do conversion therapy and who claim to be able to cure somebody of being trans or gay, which is bullshit. That's not something that's actually possible. But there you go. It's just, it's a big old mess, isn't it?
Yeah, with Chase, the specific group that sort of got cling to his videos like a fucking cancer was the Alliance Defending Freedom, and you can already tell from that name exactly what they're about. They're trying to defend the freedom to be, jerks to the LGBT community. And I looked at their channel, and it's just, you can imagine the kind of stuff there. It's very much like, can two men love each other? They answer no. I think we all know the real answer is yes. And yeah, they sort of they clinged their hook onto Chase Ross's channel, and they're not a very good channel. I don't know where they get their money from, but they only get 3,000, 4,000 hits. So when they cling on to Chase, they are getting many, many times more views directed entirely at the audience that they probably want to get to. It's not just affecting Chase. I mean, Rowan Ellis of YouTube, another YouTuber I follow, she's fucking great. Gabby is pretty famous. Tyler Oakley, the godfather of LGBT YouTube. They've all been talking about this. Even Hank Green, who sort of invented vlogging, on his channel he brought it up, and he's the brother of John Green, the writer of Fault in Our Stars. It is a wide concern amongst even straight YouTubers who are LGBT allies, and I think we should probably keep following this, because this is because teenagers go on YouTube looking for information. One of the videos that Chase got blocked, got completely taken down because all the haters kept reporting it, was where he was trying to make a packer. You got a young trans guy somewhere looking to battle the dysphoria, goes on that, and they need those resources.
Yeah, I know, and it's particularly upsetting in the light of, this is kind of a perennial problem for YouTube, isn't it? Because there's all sorts of extremist content on there, which is quite easily accessible. I've read a story just earlier this week, actually, about a mother and her child had come downstairs after just watching some stuff on YouTube, some kids' videos, but the stuff that's in the sidebar at the side that promoted was stuff saying, feminism is cancer. And so, those videos have been clicked on, and the kids just picked this phrase up at 8 years old or something, and his mum's just what? So that's very upsetting, and we'll definitely be paying more attention to this story as it continues to rumble along. But let us move on. But staying online, so it's another website story, which is Crowdfunder, who've stoked controversy this week. So there was actually a campaign, and Crowdfunder were criticised for they were hosting a fundraiser for inverted commas, school resource pack, which is produced by the group Transgender Trend, right? So alarm bells ringing already. So the idea of this campaign was to raise funds to distribute a booklet, which they've already created to schools, but the fundraiser was for the sort of distribution costs. But the same booklet, which has been described as containing incredibly harmful and untrue claims about what it means to be trans. And it is, so I've actually seen this leaflet, and it is astonishingly hateful. And the idea that this is dressed up as a legitimate resource and sort of sent out to schools is kind of scary, really. It's very insidious, isn't it?
Yeah, I haven't been following this one too closely, because every time I open one of those documents, I just get very angry, because it brings me back to when I was at school, just But yeah, from what I've gathered from following the story, Crowdfunder took it down originally because of the complaints, but then they sort of turned around and said, doesn't break our terms and conditions and guidelines. And I'm thinking, you fuckers need better guidelines if that's the case. This is going to cause some serious damage if it gets out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know what you mean about reading these, again, inverted commas, resources, but this one is actually kind of hilarious in a way, because there's one of the parts in it is with reference to cis and transgender, which is described as unscientific language, and which is very, very interesting, because obviously both of those are derived from Latin. And if you've studied any chemistry, dear listeners, obviously you might be aware that they are a type of that cis is a prefix that's well used in chemistry and biology, cisplatin and so on. So, to say that that language is unscientific when actually the Latin language has been the basis of quite a lot of scientific language and discovery for the last few thousand years is kind of hilarious. But the parts of it that are really, really troublesome is, well, a lot of it. And so it advises against creating anti-discrimination policies to protect transgender children because apparently they may not be necessary.
Well, so they're basically going like, are they going like the whole, maybe we should bully it out of them?
That's exactly it, yes. So it says that trans children should not be celebrated in schools as brave and courageous. And also, it says that there is evidence of social contagion with transgender children and the school must be wary of fostering this. Right, that's bullshit, okay? There is no way that somebody is pressured into being trans by having one of their friends do so, or because they think it's cool, or because it's trendy. It is none of those things because we're being attacked in the papers every week. It's not cool. I get things thrown at me on the street. I don't understand where they're coming from. And so for the entire leaflet, they're just using really misleading language, like girls who identify as boys and biologically male teenager, blah, 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 instead of actually acknowledging people's gender. And so this is this is messed up, essentially. And the fact that Crowdfunder have put it up because they've said doesn't violate our terms of service, we see that a lot on the internet, really. Twitter have done something similar, YouTube, as we say. Like, nobody's got a particularly coherent sense of the damage that this stuff can do.
Yeah, if Stephanie Davis Ari, if she wants to go off and, raise money for her bullshit, she could probably do a whip round in the pub or something, or, use PayPal or whatever. That's not using, a big official crowdfunder platform that sort of gives it legitimacy. And they're aligning themselves with hate. That's what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's horrible. They've taken their side, haven't they? Anyway, yes, fun and games all around. So we'll hopefully, there might be another campaign started to get it removed, but I'm not sure really. I think the best thing to do might be to, proactively engage with schools and say, look, don't use this resource. And there's a kerfuffle about this already. Stonewall have talked about it. Mermaids have talked about it. Various trans activists and campaigners have talked about it. So hopefully the word is out, is that this is not a good resource. But then I'm quite sure there are going to be some schools out there that will say, oh, yes, that's the resource we need, because we don't want to deal with it because of who we are as people.
Well, the Department of Education came out with a statement recently which sort of gave me some hope. They basically said, head teachers are best placed to make decisions in the interest of their pupils, but we want to make sure they are supported on sensitive issues such as transgender rights. Through a £3 million initiative led by the Government Equalities Office, the government is working with over 1,000 schools to look at ways of fostering understanding of LGBT issues in the classroom, which, apart from the first bit where the spokesperson says head teachers are best placed to make decisions in the interest of their pupils, which to me sounds like if a head teacher wants to get on the transgender trend train, then they're free to do so. But the thousand schools getting some money to basically teach this stuff, that's damn sight more than we ever got. So, that gives me some hope. Anyway, let's get off this. What's the next thing?
The next thing, darling, is going north of the wall now to Glasgow. I don't know why I did it in that accent. That is not a Glaswegian accent, but then maybe I don't want to do that. Anyway, so, north of the wall now to Glasgow, where a transgender woman was prevented from using the appropriate changing rooms in a branch of Debenhams, which is in violation of the 2010 Equality Act. Jay Campbell said that she was told she had to go and use the men's changing rooms in order to try on a dress, despite Debenham staff receiving training on how to deal with such situations, which is as simple as don't be a dick about it. So yes, this is a thing that happens. It shouldn't, but there are stories like this every so often. But one of the interesting things here is, so she was told to go downstairs into the men's changing area by the gatekeeper upstairs, but then when she got to that changing area, visibly upset, the people who were the attendants on the changing room were shocked that their colleague had behaved in this way.
Oh, so was it different departments? Got different information, or?
Well, no, absolutely not. I mean, Debenham staff are Debenham staff, right? So if they're in the menswear or ladieswear department or whatever, they're going to get the same training. It's just obviously some people listened and some people didn't, or some people thought, well, no, I'm just going to ignore that because I don't like trans people. But this does happen. This happened to me many years ago. It was actually just after I changed my name and so on. So literally 2 weeks in, I was buying some clothes for my new job, which was my first under my name, and I was just, no, you can't come in here. You have to go upstairs. No, but that's not appropriate. And so then the manager came over and said, look, I'll deal with this. Yes. Would you be happy to use our family changing room? And I was like, well, I really don't see why I should have to, but whatever. I really do just want to try this on. And then the family changing area was, she'd used a euphemism because it was actually that it was, so it had the disabled, the wheelchair symbol on it as well. So it was the family, disabled and trans person changing room, which is quite interesting. But there was some people in there already, which meant that I had to stand there and wait outside for however long, and with all these other people going past me who were using the changing room with no problem. And I was like, nope, I am not doing this. I, more or less burst into tears, shoved the blouse back at this stupid woman, and then walked out very, 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 very upset.
Yeah, I think everyone must have had a similar situation at some point. Like, I've had one. Like, only I bought the top at the end of it because I'm an idiot.
Well, it depends how cheap it is, really. It's like, look, I just want to buy this thing, really. But why are they preventing you from spending money? Why are they going to do that? Even if somebody is...
Because they got to protect the normals from us, Ash. They might catch trans.
Well, does that happen? Okay, actually, yes, it does. I've dated two people who, assigned male at birth, and I thought they were a boy, and it turned out they were a girl, and so that was fine, but that's happened twice, so I'm just really scared that I'm contagious or something. So, yes, gentlemen, if you fancy me, you might be in real trouble. Yeah, if you fancy me, I've got something to tell you. Anyway, so this is disappointing, isn't it? And particularly from somewhere like Debenhams, because, they have received this training, and I know a lot of trans people, myself included, who shop there regularly. Yes, it's more expensive, but because of that good service that I've always had from them, this is terribly disappointing, isn't it? But then...
Well, I think the people at Debenhams head office sort of knew that there was something up here, because they released a statement saying, we are sorry for any distress caused to the customer. Debenhams changing rooms are not gender specific. We are currently investigating the incident. So hopefully they will basically send someone in from an area manager to be like, this ain't cool. So hopefully it won't happen again at the Glasgow store.
Yeah, indeed. But, the other way around. So, okay, so moving on. And in slightly more positive news, Wadham College Student Union has unanimously passed a motion to cover students' travel to NHS gender identity clinics. The motion states that trans-related healthcare is some of the most difficult to access, noting the lengthy waiting times and the small number of clinics in the UK. So this is good, isn't it? This is a good step.
From what I understand of this, basically the fund is going to be, they're going to have like £150 per term, and they're just going to split that up between how many applicants they get. But even then, if there's like 5 people going for it, they all get like, £30 each or something. Like, that's enough for a megabus, Like, students in a megabus, they go together like, fish and chips. So, this is going to be okay. And how many more trans students are going to show up every term? Like, it doesn't sound like a lot of money, but this is going to help people in a genuine way. And God bless Wadham College, God bless Oxford University, which is a part of, and God bless everyone involved.
Awesome. But, I was kind of expecting this story to be getting a little bit more flack, because there's a lot of kind of misinformation and stuff about trans healthcare, and people really don't like money being spent on it. But this is, as you say, it's not breaking the bank, it's not a vast amount of money, because there really aren't that many of us, particularly in any given college year, so...
Which, now I'm thinking about it, it's not a good omen for how many listeners we're going to get. Like, I don't think Squarespace are ever going to come up to us and give us any of that sweet, sweet podcast advertising money.
I'm not sure that's going to happen. I'll be honest, I am just hoping that we can get in touch with all these dangerous, deadly, secretive, evil trans people who are actually in charge of the world and can manipulate events to the extent that some people seem to think that we're able to. I want some of that. I want to be part of this powerful trans lobby, yeah?
Or just like brushing away the haters and Debenhams with one hand, showing our like cabal cards and stuff, and just not only getting good service but getting discounts. I assume that's part of the deal.
One would hope, right? No, I want an infinity gauntlet. Honestly, that would solve a lot of problems. Like, okay, done. But yeah, so sticking with the theme then of people not really understanding trans healthcare, those darling types at the Mail on Sunday have, once again, provided a bumper issue of transphobia, and they've even managed a note of their usual racism by attacking a trans group and Diane Abbott in the same article. Impressive stuff. So last month, Abbott spoke at a meeting that had been organised by the Labour Party's Momentum group in support of Action for Trans Health. But I would point out that I'm not sure that this article makes it entirely clear which way round that goes, right? So did she speak at the meeting in support of Action for Trans Health, or was the meeting organised by Momentum for the benefit of Action for Trans Health and in support? I'm not quite sure which way round it was, but yes, so that's a thing. They're on it again. So apparently Action for Trans Health are an extremist group, which is super, because I'm a member. I've never been a member of an extremist group before. That's awesome.
So can you just explain what Action for Trans Health is all about?
Well, Action for Trans Health is it's a decentralized organization, and it is have you seen 120 BPM? Like,
no, I haven't.
Okay, it's an awesome film, but like there's a lot of scenes in meetings basically, of people being very, very democratic and maybe sometimes to a fault. And when I saw that film, I was like, wow, that seems terribly familiar. The whole sort of sphere of LGBT activism. But Action for Trans Health are actually a really, really brilliant organisation. So there's chapters in a number of cities all over the UK now, and so they fundraise and provide small grants for trans people to access healthcare or access travel to healthcare. So somewhat like the Wadham College thing, so people can apply for these grants to cover their hormone prescription or get the megabus to the gender clinic. They also provide advocacy services, so people who may be having trouble actually accessing that healthcare can get in touch with someone who will act as an advocate, perhaps in correspondence or on appointments themselves. And also they do some really nifty screen printing on t-shirts for fundraising, which is pretty good. That's the bit of it that I got involved in. I just like making stencils, but it turns out there's all this politics stuff as well. Who knew? So yes, Action for Trans Health got a tremendous amount of respect for them and the people involved, but the Mail are convinced that it's extremism. But then the interesting thing is, at the end of this article in the Mail, a spokeswoman for Diane Abbott had said that the MP hadn't had any information that this event was either linked with or intended to raise money for Action for Trans Health, which seems to undercut the headline somewhat. And then she also added that there was no indication that anyone from Action for Trans Health would actually be present at the meeting, and therefore that if any fundraising took place, Miss Abbott was not aware of it. So again, it's like, so this isn't even a story, is it? This like, it seems to be contradicting itself, or I suppose it's penultimate paragraph syndrome, where they can make any accusation they like, as long as they publish a rebuttal from somebody in the final two sentences. Which is, it's all rather disappointing, but, that's who they be, yo.
Yeah, when I was reading it, what really jumped out at me was the Mail claiming that Action for Trans Health advocate giving hormones to children. Is this true?
Well, what do you think? You've read it in the Mail. Do you think it's true? No, of course it isn't true. The NHS, as it supplies hormones to trans youngsters, will not do so until the person has reached the age of 16. Now, what can be prescribed before that age are hormone blockers. Now, these are a medication which are used actually for a number of conditions, one of which is called precocious puberty, whereby puberty actually starts to happen when the child is maybe 4 or 5.
I like that, precocious. It's like something out of like an Enid Blyton novel.
Yes, indeed. But yeah, precocious puberty, so it starts way too early. And
okay, that doesn't sound as good. If anyone's listening, I'm not like trying to big up precocious puberty. It doesn't sound like fun. I just like the word precocious. Anyway, sorry, go on.
No problem at all. So that's why these things were created, and they have been quite widely used in trans healthcare for something like 40 years, particularly in mainland Europe. In fact, Holland have had, or the Netherlands rather, have actually been like an ongoing basis, have been prescribing these things to help people with gender dysphoria since the 1970s, I think. And so these hormone blockers don't really do anything but stop the onset of puberty, right, as the name suggests. So that then allows the child to grow a little older and think about, okay, well, so when I was a bit younger, and when I went on the hormone blockers, I felt like I wanted to be this or that, or go one way or the other. But now, actually, I don't think that's the case. But I'm glad the blockers gave me the time and the chance to think about it. Or what's more likely, if the child's asked for it in the first place, is okay, so I've started the blockers several years ago, and yes, I've been on the blockers for however long, and I am 16 now, and yes, I would very much like to go on the hormones now, please. Yes, I have thought about it. Yes, I'm out in my life and to my parents, because you basically have to be. So again, no one is suggesting that cross-gender hormones are given to children. And the fact is, hormone blockers are already being used. So again, there's nothing here.
But surprise, surprise, Stephanie Davies Arai makes an appearance in this one saying, "I'm shocked that Miss Abbott would support an extremist organisation that pushes for total autonomy for little children to take powerful hormones that can have permanent effects on their bodies." Like, she's under the assumption that Action for Trans Health are about that, so maybe somebody should tell her.
Well, actually, I'm quite certain that she knows that that is not the case, but really, this is a person with an agenda. And this is someone who says, oh, trans ideology is dangerous. You are the one with the ideology, all right? It's not, you're the one who is convinced that trans people just don't exist or are making it up or deluded, and she's going to call Action for Trans Health an extremist group. That just, it's as ridiculous as she is, and it's ridiculous as transgender trend is.
She's getting her name out there, though. Like, she's...
Yeah, no, I know, and that's the only thing that... I mean, there are a number of things that you can do, but really, for me, what we want to do, and I think part of the reason why you and I started doing this, for all the effect it may or may not have, is to actually try and counter some of this misinformation, and these people who have an agenda, for reasons of their own, have decided that they don't want trans people to be accepted in society. For whatever reasons they have that they think are justified, that is what they're doing. They are trying to campaign for the exclusion of transgender people from public life, to make us too scared to go out, to declare ourselves, to be seen. That's the ultimate objective of a lot of this rhetoric. And so that's obviously not a nice thing to have to contend with, but
I do have to say, part of the reason why I wanted to get this podcast going was because I was basically playing way too much Pokemon.
I mean, in fairness, I see what you mean, but Pokemon's like a lighter activity than doing a load of research into really depressing stuff and people that hate you. So actually, I'd be honest, I'd have stuck with the Pokemon. But anyway, sticking with the Daily Heil, there's another story that they've run wherein apparently trans women can indeed be banned from all women's spaces if there is a justifiable reason to do so. So apparently, Ollie Entwistle, head of LGBT policy at the Government's Equalities Office, made this statement, but then added quickly that it doesn't give permission for being trans exclusionary. So again, this is another story constructed entirely around something that's not quite there. Now, I am not certain what he meant when he said that that people can be barred from spaces if there is a justifiable reason to do so. Depends where one draws the line of justifiable reason. It's like, no, we're not going to let you into this women's space because you've already killed 3 people outside and you still have the chainsaw in your hand. No, I'm not going to let you in here whether you're trans or not, kind of thing. That seems like a justifiable reason. Or if somebody who has been into the space before and has actually committed abuse or damage or, done this and that and the other, if they've already been told you're barred from here, you are not allowed in this space, as, like when one is barred from a pub, right? Then yes, fine, that would be a justifiable reason, but I really can't think of that many others, really, in terms, because that isn't being specified in this article, it does make one wonder. It's like, well, so where are other people drawing this justifiable reason line?
Hopefully, I think this is just something that's going to be, so it'll sort of be lost in the noise, because it's not a big story. But yeah, there's only one comment on the story. Simeon, maybe Simon and he spelt it wrong, I don't know, he's a Daily Mail reader, who knows. And he just says, so there is no justifiable reason to stop a woman who identifies as a man from using whatever facilities they want, then. Double standards again, I see.
Classic Daily Mail.
Alright, I think that's quite enough of some terrible news. I think now it's time for some gender pop culture disorder.
Awesome. That sounds splendid. And what are we starting with on our gender pop culture disorder today?
There is going to be a trans man undergoing transformation on the new series of Queer Eye. Have you seen it? Have you seen Queer Eye?
I have not. I've heard a lot about it, and obviously I know it's a reboot from a show some time ago because I remember it then as well. But I was put off the first iteration of it for, one reason and another, and I didn't check out this one. But then everybody has been saying to me, "Oh no, you must check this out. It's actually really good and super good and inclusive." So it's on the list, So you're a fan?
Absolutely. I had the same thing. I actually saw a couple of the old series, and there's some parts where it was a bit mean. I wasn't really into. But then this show is very much about kindness and helping someone who's in a bit of a hole. Like, it's not just a bunch of gay guys showing up and being like, "Oh, darling, you need some pinstripes." It's very much basically the whole thing. The way it works is that there's 5 guys. They call themselves the Fab Five. There's Anthony, who's in charge of food, Tan, who's in charge of fashion, Karamo, who's in charge of culture, Bobby, who's the design expert, and Jonathan is the grooming guy. And basically they come in and they find a guy who's in a bit of a rut and
sort him out.
Yeah, they turn him round, and it is such a kind, loving show. Like, there was one episode in the first season where they basically found this guy called, who basically referred to himself as "you can't fix ugly." And it's heartbreaking. Like, he's been in love with this woman for decades, but he has never really had the confidence to, he used to be in a relationship with her, but he never had the confidence to, make it work in a real way. And they sort of turn his life around. He's now engaged to this woman. He's going to get married to her. All starting from getting him some nice clothes, redoing his house, teaching him to cook a few things. And one of the funny things I think about the show is that there is a complete imbalance on how much work all of the Fab Five do. Bobby comes in and just guts their house. He rebuilds it from the ground up. And then there's Anthony, who basically comes in and teaches them how to do a salad. It's not fair. But it's a lovely show. And it's primed. It's really cool for a trans guy to show up. I mean, obviously you get representation of trans guys, which almost never happens. But also, it's perfect because, when you first come out, you don't know what you're doing. You're a bit lost. I mean, you're trying to find,
yeah.
I don't know if find who you are, but sort of refine it. Like, you've had ideas all the time in the closet, and then you sort of come out and it's a whole different world. And so this guy, I've seen the trailer. The trailer's out. It's about 2 minutes long. You can get it on YouTube easy enough. And this guy, he seems really lovely. I'm very glad that I'm very, very happy that this is happening. And the new series is coming out on the 15th of June on Netflix. I'll be following this very closely, and in the next pod I will give you a full review, because hopefully they're going to release a whole lot at once, which is Netflix's way.
Indeed, super, and I will have to check out the first series, and then we can both fangirl over it together. Won't that be fun? That is now it's now further up the list, so go on, that sounds great. As you say, fantastic to see just casual, not super casual, but just trans representation, people showing up in the same context as, it's not about them necessarily being trans, it's just, no, here is a person and that is part of their identity, but we're going to have a look at all of the other things, because these guys are still going to be sticking with their areas of expertise, right? Fashion, salads, gutting houses, etc. They're not going to say, "Oh yes, let's have a deep and involved 5-way discussion about gender dysphoria with you," because that's not their bit kind of thing. So they'll still be, it's just great. It's awesome.
Well, I think that's going to come up, because I think usually there is a central issue in the guy's the subject of the show's life, and I would be very surprised if that didn't come up. But I trust these people to handle it in a very sensitive and kind way. So I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm very much looking forward to watching the episode and going away being like, "Oh, there's these 5 guys that are just completely cool about trans stuff." That's what I love seeing. That makes me feel warm inside. But anyway, there's quite a bit of other news to get through, so let's dive right in. There is a trans woman coming to Supergirl, which I am very excited about. It's a fucking awesome show. Basically, for people who don't know, it's a show basically about Supergirl. It's part of the Arrowverse. Basically, it's in the same universe as other shows like Legends of Tomorrow, The Flash, and Arrow, which is about the Green Arrow, basically. And also the criminally cancelled Constantine, which I'm still upset about, because the guy who was in that, Matt Ryan, is the most attractive man I've ever seen. I'm thoroughly obsessed with him. But anyway, Yeah, the only information that's been released about the character is that they are going to be called Nia, and they've released an open casting call, which I'm going to read out to you now. So if anybody's interested in being on the show, they should totally go for this. I wouldn't know how, but, you'll find out if you're actors or something. Basically, it says, transgender woman, early 20s, open ethnicity, a confident wonder kid, a fashionista. Once a political speechwriter, Nia is the newest addition to the Catco investigative reporting team. Catco is basically the company that Kara, Supergirl, works for when she's in her downtime not being Supergirl. With her, she brings sparkling wit and biting humour, but with the bantery, chic facade, lays a wonderful, soulful young woman who has much to offer the world. A young Cat Grant type. Which sounds very exciting, because what tends to happen in the show is at some point she's going to get superpowers. At some point she's going to don a costume and punch some fucks in the face. And I am very much looking forward to that. And the show's great because it's really diverse. You've got people of it's very racially diverse. You've got an openly out lesbian relationship. They're on the last season, they're sort of gearing up to get married. It's all great. And also, from a really nerdy point of view, it prominently has the Martian Manhunter involved, who's criminally underrated in the DC universe. He's never going to feature in the films, and he's just great. It also sort of coincides with a recent story in the Supergirl comic where they basically introduced a non-binary character who Supergirl helps out coming out and battling with bullies. That was in Supergirl 19, which I haven't read yet, but it's definitely on my list. So yeah, everyone should get involved in the Supergirl universe because you will love the shit out of it.
Alright, yes, God, there's so many things on the list now. I hate talking to you. I feel like every time I talk to you, I feel like I leave and I've got homework,
Well, every time I talk to you, you leave me with homework, looking up some scientific or sociological theory. Like, you're the science, I'm the humanities. That's why we make a good team, Ashleigh.
Hell yes. Anyway, yeah, awesome. So I look forward to that, and obviously, as I keep saying, representation super important. So our next story is a little closer to home, isn't it?
Yeah, and also I'm not entirely as excited about this because I've not really been into the show. But basically, Emmerdale has cast a trans man.
Yes.
Basically, as I understand it, because I've never watched Emmerdale, I'm probably going to watch a few episodes mostly for the pod, but I've never been a big soap opera girl myself. But basically, an actor called Ash Palmiciano, I'm probably butchered that. I'm so sorry, Ash, if you happen to be listening. He's previously appeared in Boy Meets Girl, the sitcom from BBC Two starring Rebecca Root. He's going to portray Matty Barton. And I can't tell if his origin's problematic or not. I'm sure you'll probably be able to fill me in. But basically, there was a character called Hannah Barton who was on the show many years ago. Her character left to move to London, and he is going to reappear on the show as, a trans guy, Matty. So is that problematic, do you think, or is that okay?
I don't know if that's a retcon or not, or, if they had it in mind back then. Oh, well, no, we'll bring that character back in some different capacity, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, in fairness, it's a perfectly plausible sequence of events, isn't it? Someone moving away from their family and stuff where they grew up, and then actually transitioning and stuff. That is a thing that happens. But yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, interestingly, as you say, I've not watched very many episodes of Emmerdale, and when I did, it was, God, absolutely ages ago. It's because I signed up for a casting agency at some point when I was 16, and I had a brush with being cast on Emmerdale myself. And I would have been Lady Tara, I don't know who that is, whereas nephew, which obviously would no longer be appropriate.
So this could have been you. Like, you could have come back years later and been,
Yeah, and been Ashleigh. Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, it's interesting that they've obviously got a different actor in to do it, instead of getting the same actress back and saying, okay, you're a trans man now, so get your hair cut short and we'll bind your chest and everything. It's like they've actually cast a trans actor. That is the crucial thing. And Ash themselves is, I think they've sort of written and kind of popped up, his name's crossed my desk. We might even have been at a thing through All About Trans.
Ooh, get you making names, getting out there.
Yeah, no, I'm kicking names and taking ass.
Did you mean it to come out like that?
Yes, I did.
We are a sex-positive podcast. You're more than welcome to continue along that vein. Sorry.
Even though we're not fans, I think we can see that this is a positive development, and obviously depending on how that backstory is handled in the show. But yeah, great news, fantastic stuff. again, just casual representation of trans people in British soaps, because there is, there's Annie Wallace on Hollyoaks, and, well, actually, all too briefly, there was Riley Carter Millington on EastEnders as well, which was another casting call that I went to, but hey, they ended up going with a trans man, but I was there at, like, a kind of ideas session thing, and the ones in my group were also all trans women, and I was like, oh, is that the way that they're going with it then? But then they ended up casting a trans man. They saw a lot of people that day. But then their character was just kind of dropped out of it without much as a a wink or a tip of the hat. So yeah, we'll see how this develops, I'm sure, and if anything comes up that's worth commenting upon, if it does anything that's particularly good or bad, I am sure we'll be talking about it here in the coming months.
Yeah, I will catch a few episodes, but the thing is, it airs weeknights at 7 o'clock every night on ITV. So there's a lot of episodes, so I don't know if I'm going to catch all of them, but I'm sure that I'll be able to give you at least half a decent review, at least on the next pod, hopefully, if he shows up. But yeah, moving on to A Fantastic Woman. Basically, I ranted at you about this on our practice podcast. I'm bringing it up again because it is that good. I think everyone should watch it, because it's not only it is the best film about a transgender person I've ever seen. It's one of the best films. Like, before that, it was Boy Meets Girl, the American thing, starring Michelle Hendley, and that was sort of like a bit ropey rom-com. It was good, but it was more a thing for me because, it's like, oh, there's someone like me, and they're sexually desirable in this film. But then there's this film came out in 2016, and it's a Chilean movie, won Best Foreign Film at the Oscar, directed by Sebastian Lelia, and starring amazing trans actor Daniela Vega, who plays Marina Vidal. Basically, she plays a transgender singer who faces horrors of bullshit when her older boyfriend dies suddenly. Empire magazine called it microaggressions to film, and that is kind of almost there, but some of the times it's very much macroaggressions. It's sometimes major aggressions. The film basically chronicles her having to maintain her identity in the face of bullshit, and it is very touching as a trans person to watch it, because there's a lot of it where you'll be able to look at the screen and think, I know exactly what that is. I have lived through that. And it portrays it sensitively and very well. And all the way through there is this mantra where she basically says, I am Marina. And she always maintains that. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, lovely film. One other take that I got was from my flatmate, who, it was a very good point, where they basically said it's sometimes hard to watch, and they would have preferred more trans portrayals showing that being trans isn't inherently tragic. So that is very much a good point against the film, but I think the other stuff that I mentioned overrides that, and it is very close to my heart. So that's out now. You can download and watch that on YouTube and Google Play for about £3. It's also on the Curzon On Demand website. It didn't get much of a release over here, so yeah, you can definitely go out now and watch it, and you should. And I also believe that Daniela Vega should totally go for the Supergirl job, because she would be amazing in it. But anyway, I think that's enough of me fangirling over everything amazing. Do you have any thoughts on A Fantastic Woman? Have you seen it?
I have not yet seen it, even though you have been instructing me to for many moons now, for which I can only apologise. But yeah, because she presented an Oscar at that ceremony as well, didn't she? Not the Oscar for that film, but Danielle Vega, the actress, presented an Oscar, which in itself was, I believe that was a first, and a significant moment. And I see what your housemate means when they say that you want to see something where being trans is not inherently tragic. And, with the Danish Girl sort of laid heavily on that particular thing, didn't it? But this one sounds different. It sounds like it's kind of demonstrating that, microaggressions and difficulties that trans people genuinely do encounter in their lives. And so it's not that that's inherently tragic, but yes, I would like to see some more positive stories, but to have something like this that's been so highly regarded, so lauded, and Oscar-winning movie about a trans person being played by a trans person, that is absolutely 100% the sort of thing that we want to see. Depressing as the film's content might actually be. So,
well, all I'm going to say is I don't want to spoil it too much, but it ends well. I left it feeling good.
Well, I will check that out by the next pod, and I will come back with a recommendation of my own. How's that?
That sounds good. It's been very much all on me, and it just make it sound like our relationship is me basically shouting at you, watch this thing, do this thing, which I guess it kind of is. Sorry about that.
Well, in fairness, I'm most of the time I ignore you, so it's good. Anyway, so we're now moving on beyond our galaxy of entertainment. Thank you so much, Michelle. On to the next section of the show, the hot take. And our hot take this week is, well, there's a couple of them to be perfectly honest, but starting by noting that it was recently the anniversary of the institution of Clause or Section 28 of the Local Government Act. This was a piece of legislation instituted in 1988 here in the UK and wasn't repealed until 2004, and it essentially prevented any... the significant impact was in schools, where it prevented teachers from talking about homosexual relationships and life as if it was as valid as a heterosexual relationship. In fact, that was some of the language that was in the sort of campaign for and around this law, was that, we don't want our kids to be seeing gay people as normal people. So it was recently the anniversary of this terrible law, which absolutely had an impact on myself, on I think you as well, Michelle, because our generation, our entire educational period was under this law. And that meant that none of the teachers could be out. There could be no LGBT leaflets or guidance or anything like that for the entire time that we were at school. And obviously not just you and I, thousands and thousands of other people as well. And this is not just specifically about trans people, obviously. This is far more widely applied to the LGBT community. So a story that came up recently around the time of the anniversary in May was a story about a teacher who was a lesbian under Section 28 who described it as absolutely frightening. Sue Sanders, who is actually the founder of LGBT History Month and she chairs of Schools Out, she campaigned against it at the time while working as a teacher. So she described it as very, very frightening, and said that it was very, very difficult to be out. There was no support at all. If you were found to be a lesbian or a gay and a teacher, the chances were you'd be sacked, right? And in fact, while teaching, Sanders did have a formal complaint made against her for being out at school. And so this was a problem. There was, a complaint, and this was a legitimate complaint saying, no, we don't want gay people around our children. And that was the law, and that was the culture, which was definitely enabled by a very, very homophobic right-wing press who, in another example of a manufactroversy or a sort of moral panic, over a children's book about a daughter living with two dads. And because that was presented as a children's resource, there was a huge campaign against it in, among other, all of the usual right-wing tabloids and tabloids that think they're broadsheets, which eventually resulted in Margaret Thatcher's government instituting this very, very damaging law.
I think it's important to remember that also one of the major components of this was the AIDS crisis, the HIV crisis, which was happening around the same time.
And, but then, yes, it was the result of that crisis, that epidemic, and people's fears over that, but then it also, by doing what it did to schools and local government offices and so on, it prevented any useful information about HIV and about how it was spread and about how to prevent it from being distributed to where it was most needed. So far from actually helping in some way with AIDS and the treatment thereof, this actually made the entire situation worse at a time when things were really, really not good for the LGBT community. So the fact that this was really only, it was only repealed in, 2004 or 5?
Yeah, about then, yeah, because I remember thinking, years later, just it swallowed up my entire school life. And, I don't think, they basically put in the clause aiming it at the L and the G, probably not believing the B existed. But I don't think they would have differentiated between different types. They would have assumed that trans kids are gay, or they would have assumed that being trans is the same as being gay. So, there was no chance of either of us getting any kind of information. I didn't know what being trans was till I was, 18 to 20? I didn't really know. I just thought I was broken. And I can't stop thinking sometimes late at night, just God, if a teacher explained what being trans was and that it was fine, how different would my life be? How different would have our lives been, That
had happened once, and then even if, who can say really, but if that one teacher had said that, and then that, I can go and talk to that teacher if nobody else about how I'm feeling, just to have that one thing would have been so, so helpful. And the reason we've sort of started with this, even though the story and the anniversary a little while ago, is because there is obviously a very, very similar kind of anti-LGBT propaganda law in Russia, which is where the World Cup is now, is currently taking place, drawing, one assumes hundreds or thousands of football fans from all over the world, some of whom could well be LGBT people, into Russia, which has this extremely toxic law, similar to Section 28, whereby, no assistance or material or anything like that can be provided by any government agents.
And it's got a title that very much is... It seems to have been brought up for the very same reasons that was brought up in the UK. The name of the law was "For the purpose of protecting children from information advocating for a denial of traditional family values."
Okay, so that's, there you go. There's your moral panic. But then, this is definitely a concern because Russia has this law, famously, which has been protested against within and without Russia, and they are now hosting the World Cup.
Well, the interesting thing is that the Russian World Cup was... The World Cup was handed to Russia in 2010 amidst accusations of bribery from the UK Football Association. So, and FIFA is famously one of the most corrupt institutions in the world. Like Sepp Blatter, the guy that runs the place, he's got some accounts in Panama. You know what I mean? He's been taking money off the top for decades, probably. So you could definitely believe that, and this entirely seems to go down to money. So they are holding this event in Russia. It would have cost way too much to change it after the law came into effect in 2013. That's when the first rumblings of protest started to happen for the World Cup. Like there was a couple of petitions getting up to nearly 100,000 signatures all from people all across the world. And Sepp Blatter was like, well, we're not changing it, probably because it would have cost too much and caused an international crisis, which I can kind of see the reasoning behind it. But basically, we cannot go to this World Cup. You and I, we cannot go there because, essentially promoting homosexuality could be just us wearing a dress. You know what I mean? It's so vague.
It is. I mean, so do you think the English football team should have boycotted it? Should teams from around the world have said, well, no, we're not going to participate in this?
The idealistic, quixotic side of me is very much yes. The FA has had accusations of homophobia for decades, so this would be the prime time to basically be score a massive PR win, at least for the LGBT community. But the problem would be, football fans across the country would have nothing to watch this summer. They would probably be incredibly disappointed. Plus, it would take away from any potential protests that the England team may have planned. I would love to see them all come onto the field wearing rainbow pins or something. Because the Russian government has come out saying that they're not going to come after the football teams. That's not their thing. They don't want that to happen. So, something like that, a protest law, sort of like that guy in America who knelt during the national anthem. I would love to see that. So I can see both sides, but there is the almost irrational side of me, just they should have fucking told them to go to hell.
Yeah. But then, unfortunately, that's never going to happen. And again, that's down to the money, isn't it? But I think I'm sure I've seen a story about at least one country, possibly a European country, who actually do have rainbows on their kit for this. I can't remember who. It might have been Denmark. I'm not sure. It's possible I made that up in some sort of, drug-fueled fever dream earlier this week, and that might not be a real thing. But absolutely, I would love to see some sort of subtle or indeed less than subtle acts of protest from the footballers since, as Russia has said, it doesn't really plan to arrest them, but then I suppose it depends what they get up to. They could justify anything if they push hard enough.
Yeah, basically the risks to fans going across to Russia are pretty immense. MPs have come out saying that there are risks of violence against fans who may wander away from city centres, if for no other, at the basic level, because they are England fans wearing England tops and basically the St. George's flag being everywhere. There's a risk that certain elements of the Russian population will attack them. I don't know the ins and outs of that angle, but it is very true that the amount of homophobic, transphobic hate crimes have skyrocketed. I think we've all heard about the paedophile hunters, they call themselves, where they basically go online, find some gay kid somewhere, get them to meet up for a date, and then they just beat the shit out of them. Like, that is a growing concern. So, and trans people at the very least, like, they get off the plane, they could be slapped with any number of punishments. Like, the penalties for breaking this law, from what I looked up, for Russian citizens, is a fine of up to 5,000 rubles, which is about 60 quid, which doesn't sound like a lot, but imagine that every time you give your boyfriend a peck on the cheek, that is 60 quid potentially. Plus, Russian police aren't known for their light touch. You know what I mean?
No, I wouldn't have said that they were. That's not one of their defining characteristics, is it?
But it's worse for foreigners, who would basically be subject to up to 15 days detention, followed by deportation, or a 5,000 rubles fine. So there is a risk that, like, a couple of LGBTs would go out, have a few too many to drink, get a little bit handsy, and bang, they're in prison for 15 days. Like, that is a very real risk. And I don't know what Russian prison's like, but, prison's not good.
I have read some believably unpleasant testimony about it, but let's not dwell. Yeah, this is, as you say, this is absolutely a concern, particularly for LGBT fans travelling there, and, I'd get more angry about it if I was more engaged in football, I think, but then, there's that whole push at the moment from a number of quarters, in the UK and all over the world, to make sport quite a lot more inclusive, and not just in terms of homophobia, of course, like racism and whatever else. But as you mentioned, the FA seems to have had a bit of a homophobia problem for some time. So, but I do think things are changing, because in this country we have the Stonewall and the Rainbow Laces campaign. And we have people like dear old good boy Neville Southall on Twitter, who, frankly, and this is not a phrase I use very often, but he is an absolute legend.
See, you've mentioned him before. Who is Neville Southall?
Neville Southall is a former goalkeeper from Chelsea in, I want to say, the early 90s. And I only know this because a friend of mine is a fan, and he explained this to me. So, but he pops up on Twitter very, very regularly, being an ally to all different sorts of people, trans people, sex workers. He regularly works with diversity role models now, and they sort of take over his Twitter feed for I think it's on Wednesdays. The way it's worked, and the way it, and the reason it works really is because he's going through this very, very public learning process and asking questions on social media, and then sort of listening to the responses and going, oh, yeah, all right, that makes sense. That sounds great. And so he's written articles, and he's just, he's the sort of shining, iconic example of precisely how good an ally, a straight white guy using his privilege to spotlight and to say, to make these comments and sort of learn these things and get this stuff out, because that would essentially, if he's talking about it, then his fans and his followers are talking about it, and that's a group of people who might not necessarily be following Stonewall on Twitter and whatever else, a way to sort of get the message out to everybody. So yes, we love Neville Southall. You should totally follow him on Twitter. He's awesome. So
that sounds like he has a bravery in a way, because he's a footballer from like the early 90s. It's probably safe to say that football culture from that time was not exactly accepting of LGBT people. Like, there's a famous case of Justin Fashanu, the first professional British footballer who came out, and it eventually sort of led to his death. Like, he killed himself when he moved to America after his career took an absolute nosedive when he came out. Like, I mean, that I only really know about that because I sort of I'm a tran, I go online, I sort of go down the rabbit hole, and boom, there's this horrific story that was happening in our lifetime in the late 80s. And so for Neville Southall, a football player from roughly that era, to come out to his fans with this kind of stuff is incredibly brave. Like, the true meaning of the word progressive, to be a progressive is to do something hard. And coming out in favour of us, that is a progressive move. So my hat off to him. He sounds like a fucking legend.
he absolutely is. Good boy, Neville Southall. He's a good one. And I think that wraps up our little football-related segment, since we can't really spin out how little we know about it any longer, I feel. So
I think we did all right. Like, you know, I've learned a lot in my research, and going back to, I actually followed football for 1 year in 1996 to 1997, I followed Newcastle United because my dad was a supporter, is still a supporter, and I wanted to basically, fly the boy flag, which was a mistake. I flew that fucking flag for 25 years. I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, I followed that season. Newcastle came in second in the Premier League. I can probably name every player from that team. And then the next season started, and I was like, this is exactly the same as last season. It was like House, It was the same fucking thing. So I just lost interest. I was like, oh right, I've done it now. I did season 1 for me, and season 2 was too samey, so I left.
Awesome, and that's football. Who'd have thought it would be so easy? So, rattling through the show, racing towards the final moments. Up next, of course, the Dickhead Dispatches. This is a section where we highlight somebody who's just particularly, or several somebodies, who is being particularly a dickhead this week. And this one, if you're listening to this in England, you probably know this person's name. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, Anne Widdecombe.
Way! I don't know why I did that. She doesn't deserve a way.
Yeah, she never ever deserves that reaction. What's she been up to, Michelle?
Well, she's been rather busy for her. She doesn't really do a lot these days. She just sort of sit in her house, frothing at the mouth at whatever nonsense whatever she deems as nonsense. She has submitted and had published an article to the Sunday Express. Basically, the headline is, "Why do we fall for transgender lunacy?" asks Anne Widdecombe. And it's full of some fucking clangers. The usual, there's men and women, we're
dangerous,
mixing the two up, blah, 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 blah.
And apparently, the trans community needs stopping in its tracks and blah, blah, blah. But then she also points out and says, let's look at the hard facts. It's like, well, okay, so the hard facts are, despite what you might say about being born either male or female, which, incidentally, that completely ignores intersex people, but yeah, sure, let's pop that on one side for the moment. Let us look at the hard facts of biology, which is quite a lot more complicated than she is trying to make it sound. In terms of chromosomes and different animals that can and do change gender under various sets of circumstances, and seahorses that actually carry the young and so on when they're the males. So, those are some hard facts which are about biology. What she seems to be doing is conflating these with trans people who do exist as being some kind of conspiracy to control the world. It's astonishing the number of people who are ostensibly people that you'd put in charge of things, although I would argue Anne Widdecombe should never been in charge of anything.
Anne Widdecombe's a very, very odd case, because years ago she was part of Church of England, and that seemed to be sort of the ground floor of her political philosophy. But the second that they allowed female bishops, she converted to Catholicism, because she doesn't believe that women should be allowed to, preach to the people. I've never really heard I've heard of women who are essentially against feminist advances, but that takes a special kind of colossal fucking bellend, doesn't it?
Certainly does. And so Anne Widdecombe has been kind of a thorn in the side of people for ages, or she certainly used to be, whereas now she pops up and she's just like the mad racist auntie at Christmas. Like, oh, shut up, but she's dropping in all the subtle right wing dog whistles here. It's like, oh, it's lunacy, and so men who self-identify as women, and so at no point are the term trans or trans woman or trans man ever used. It's always just men who identify as women. It's not we're not identifying as anything. There's it's a little bit more complicated than that. Just saying, and it's really tiresome. And so the fact is, why was she even offered the opportunity? Does she have a regular column in the Express?
She does have a column. I'm looking at it now. Stop the persecution of British pensioners. Stupid and useless. I've been called far way worse in my time. These don't sound entirely unreasonable, up until you get to the big rainbow flag. And it's like, oh, okay. I can just see her in a pokey London flat just going, fucking Look-a-bitters.
Anyway, so, fun and games. So that's Dickhead Dispatches.
Cool, I think it's time to announce our hero, baby. I will never sing again. Yeah, I think it's going to be a joint prize this week, because, Yeah, basically, you've sort of brought Neville Southall into my line of sight, and I think he deserves a mention.
You're not wrong. Neville Southall always deserves a mention. So yeah, absolutely, totally happy for good boy Nev to be our hero this time. So, and your second one?
I'm going to give it to Chase Ross, who we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, has been doing sterling work on his channel. Everyone should check it out, Uppercase Chase 1. Like I said before, he has chronicled his transition online, which is a very brave thing to do, especially these days in the world of, well, the online atmosphere that it is now. But yeah, he goes online, he talks his truth, he helps the kids. He is a damned good guy, and I thoroughly recommend everyone watch the shit out of him.
Cool. Heroes of the Week, Chase and Neville.
There'll be our heroes, baby. I'm going to sing this every week. Fuck all of you.
Please don't sing it every week.
Alright. I will just start calling you in the middle of the night to sing it to you.
No, I'm going to start switching my phone off at night. I was going to join in with the singing, but no, like I do most of my singing through a vocoder, so... yes, that is more or less the end of the show. We will be back next time, but before we toddle off, just one little thing. Thought I might get a quick plug in while we're here. I am in a band. Yes, a band. So, we're called Dead Pixel. We are on Analog Trash Records. You can find us on the YouTubes, on the SoundClouds, and even on the Spotifys, which I wasn't aware of until recently, actually. We were on Spotify and I totally didn't know that. Well done, me. But Michelle has seen us. You have seen us, haven't you?
Yes, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was... like, the night itself was brilliant, but you guys were the headliners and you topped it off lovely, lovely stuff. My grammar there failed me because I am so in awe of the majesty of Dead Pixel.
Thank you so much. So we are playing in Manchester on the 29th of June, should any of our British and indeed Northern listeners feel like boogieing on along. How about you, Michelle? What have you got on this month?
Not a lot. I am writing a comic.
Ooh.
Issue 1 should be out shortly. It's called Junk. I'm very proud of it. I've basically just finished framing it. I'm sending it off to the artiste, my friend Joe Stokeld. Very, very talented artist. I'll probably give you more information when that comes to fruition in the coming weeks. But yeah, I think that's it for the show. Ashleigh, good job. Let me just do a quick plug for the social media accounts. So we have a Twitter that should hopefully be started up by the time this drops, at What the Trans. We also have a YouTube channel, What the Trans with a Z, mostly because somebody somewhere has taken it. Going to upload the pod to there as well, but probably maybe do the odd video down the line. Don't know yet. And yeah, so follow us, subscribe, like, notify, all do all the internet stuff. Just do all the internet
Just do the internet stuff for us, and I promise you will get only the latest, greatest, and finest of our exploits as we completely make this shit up as we go along.
Alright, thanks. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.